Let me take you back to the year 2017, a golden year for gaming. We had blockbusters like Cuphead, Breath of the Wild, Little Nightmares, Resident Evil 7, and this. Hi, so I'm stuck in this basement and there's a weird guy behind me and he's holding me hostage until I, quote, fix his game. How is he able to hold me and my whole room hostage? I don't know, but I'm not going to question it. He has a shovel. So Hello Neighbor has been in a lot of controversy in terms of the game's development, from the timeline of patches leading to the final release, the quality of the final release itself, and everything they've done to pick up the scraps and attempt to be relevant again. This game, just like the actual neighbor's house, is crowded and messy in some parts and utterly empty in others. I'm not sure how the second game holds up. I only watched one streamer play the whole thing, and from what I've seen, it's an improvement, but still confusing and convoluted. But we're not here to talk about the second game, we're here to talk about the older child that is Hello Neighbor 1. With all of its inconsistencies and plot holes and just overall mess of a game this is, I want to take it upon myself to look at the problems, come up with solutions, and implement them to see if we can save this game. I'm going to look at the story, the gameplay, the art style, and the neighbor himself, and pitch some ideas to see if this game could be salvageable. Now, before we start, I want to get a few disclaimers out of the way. First off, this is all for fun. I don't know if I can get in legal trouble with their development team with all of this, so just in case, this is all my opinion and all in good fun. Second disclaimer, if you truly love this game, hats off to you. I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum or anything, and hey, I'll admit it, there are some aspects of this game that I do like. I'll get into more detail when we get deeper in, but I'm just gonna put that out there. I ain't judging anyone's opinion on this game. Cool? Cool. Okay, let's get started. His stares are making me anxious. Okay, so first, before we get into the problems, let me give you a quick rundown of the story. You play as a kid, I forgot his name, and we witness a guy who we call the neighbor frantically hiding something in his basement. We think it's another kid, so being a stupid child and not calling the police, we decide to play superhero and save this hostage. Except, oops, there's no kid in here and we end up getting captured ourselves. Time goes by and we find a way to escape the house, and then 20 years pass. We didn't call the cops or anything, that would be stupid. We get a note that we've been evicted and our only option is to move back into our childhood home. By this time, the neighbor's house has been fully destroyed, but a strange monster is roaming the area. We get to our place and take a little nap. Suddenly, we wake up to see the neighbor's house bigger and crazier than ever. We hear another kid being trapped in the basement, and not wanting another kid to be traumatized again, we go into the house and try to save the child. During which we are subjected to weird nightmare sequences run by mannequins or something, I don't know. Eventually we get to the basement, and after running through an extremely dark labyrinth, we get into the final door, and it reveals another dream sequence that makes the neighbor Godzilla. After that happens, we get to another dream sequence, one where we see a child version of us in a really big house running from that shadow monster from before. We body block him and become bigger than the monster, and we defeat him. And then we wake up. Yep, the whole final act and big boss battles were all just a dream. They didn't matter. Trauma? What's that? We get out of our house and greet the day with a smile, ending the game. So, yeah, that's the quote-unquote story of Hello Neighbor. Can you see why people didn't like this? Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that depending on what version of the game you play, the story is different. In most versions, you play as an adult trying to get into the basement, and over time they add the idea of a child trapped in there. The main selling point of the game is that there is a basement, the neighbor is trying to hide and contain something, and we want to see what it is. Now, where the problem starts is that they reveal what's in the basement after the first act. The whole selling point of Hello Neighbor is the basement, and after the first 30 minutes, we figure out what is in there, and what we think is in there isn't. It's just another weird stretchy room that doesn't add much to the environment. And then after the reveal, the game tries to find ways to keep you interested in what's in the basement when we know it's nothing really too exciting since we've seen it before. And once the final act comes around and we're subjected to a bunch of trippy nightmare sequences, we're just more confused. But What's weird about this aspect of the story is that they revealed the main mystery of the game so early, yet they kept making the overall mystery extremely vague. They made the story of the basement, the neighbor, and us extremely loose and vague, with the intention of gathering as many theorists as possible. But after a while, it gets to a point where it's so vague that no one really knows where to start, and it feels like nothing will amount to anything. And the worst part is that they were really prideful on how mysterious they were being. They wanted people to theorize to the point where they tweeted MatPat multiple times to dissect their games frame by frame and make a video on it. Because at the time, the best way to promote your mascot horror game was to get people to theorize about it. However, they shot themselves in the foot for making it so mysterious that everyone lost interest because they saw it as a lost cause. So how do we fix this? Well, strangely, my first thought is to make the story more obvious. Now, we can still have some things shrouded in mystery like the backstory of the neighbor or even how his house is able to operate the way it does. But the overall story should have a motif that people can take away from or resonate with. So, I propose, make the motif all about a child being kidnapped and the trauma that comes with it. Now, in terms of the game, I don't think it would be hard to do. In fact, some people think that's what they were going for. When the adult player goes back to the neighbor's house, they literally have a panic attack and then a nightmare about it later. Some say even the shadow monster is a manifestation of his trauma. I think it would be really interesting if they delved into that more throughout the whole game and incorporated it into the idea of the house and the neighbor. Think of it like a monster house situation. You have a creepy neighbor in his weird house, and when you get into the house, weird and creepy stuff happens that doesn't make sense. So do something like that, but with the basement. Make the house itself weird and confusing, but once you get to the basement, have it be a creepy, warped area where logic doesn't apply. That would explain the weird nightmare sequences that happen in the game. And that would be an interesting way to portray the childhood trauma. Make everything warped and unintelligible. It would explain the mind of a child going through something so horrific. Going back to the main house, you can use that to sprinkle little Easter eggs about the neighbor and his backstory. Having the house and basement be separate stories would make everything digestible but leave enough room for mystery and theory material. Now, I feel like it would be difficult to implement this idea into Act 3, but I think just having the dream sequence be real would be fine. Like, instead of all of it being a dream, the player still gets evicted, still moves back home, but the neighbor's house is still there and we see him trying to kidnap another kid, and we rush into action. Instead of this weird trippy boss battle, this boss could just be traversing a different version of the basement and even finding an actual kid in there and saving him. The ending could be, we save the kid, call the cops, and the neighbor gets arrested. Happy ending, and the player gets to heal from their trauma. Overall, I think this is a good idea for a tweaked story. Motifs and themes that could be translated in real life can be really effective in games, and I think this idea, we'd still have enough room for mystery and horror, but also create a world where the story feels feasible. While you can have a good story, it means nothing if your game can't function, and oh boy, does Hello Neighbor not function. So let's get into that next. How would I describe the gameplay? Well, it feels like someone's playing a prank on you. Like you've been thrown into a Dr. Seuss book with no context and they just pulled out the Thumblewonker or whatever. In terms of the gameplay, Hello Neighbor consists of mostly running from the neighbor and puzzles, in heavy air quotes. The reason I put in air quotes is that I would not call these puzzles. The gameplay of Hello Neighbor is the definition of a wild goose chase. Okay, here's an example. So in normal games, you're like, oh, I need to collect keys. There's one in that glass box right there, connected to this sliding puzzle. Maybe if I solve this, the box will open, or I'll get an item that will help me break the glass. But a puzzle in Hello Neighbor is like, oh, I need to collect keys. There's one behind that fence. Now what? There's no hint at like a secret pathway. There's nothing in my inventory that can help, and there's no hint that an item is needed here. I'm just gonna stack boxes and get over. All the puzzles in this game require you to do multiple separate things just to get close at completing the puzzles. Now, there are some cases where that can be fine, but the issue lies in the fact that there are no hints set up at all to show you what to do. Most of the game is just wandering around and seeing if things make sense. You gather a bunch of items just to question if you really need them or not, and at the end you just end up finding your own scuffed way around the puzzle and not using the mechanics of the game. And again, there are cases where that can be fun, but it doesn't end up being fun because the whole experience is shrouded in minor annoyance and confusion. The biggest issue in Hello Neighbor's gameplay is the mechanics and logic aren't concrete and digestible. There is no unifying and consistent form of logic that the player can have while playing the game that can help them move forward. In most games, there is a sense of logic that the player learns and can depend on whenever they get stuck or don't know what to do. Like in Poppy Playtime, no matter what, the player can depend on the grab bag to either grab an object, pull something, or activate the next step. Or in every LEGO game ever, don't know what to do? Just break something. And also, throughout most games, there are hints that can help you move along the puzzles and obstacles. Sometimes the object will glow, or you'll have a pop-up showing what to do. Sometimes they play a whole cutscene just to get the point across. Hello Neighbor doesn't have a solidified form of logic that the player can depend on when they're dealing with puzzles or any form of hints to help them figure it out. Everyone just ends up looking up a walkthrough, and that's not how you play a game. I feel like this is more the fault of the art style, and I'll get into that later, but first I want to propose my solution. My solution to this issue is to have all the puzzles be in one room. Each room of the house has its own puzzle, and they have their own logic that the player can use to help solve the puzzle. That way, you can still have a bunch of rooms throughout the whole house and fill them up with wacky items, but it would still make the puzzles and obstacles easier to understand and more fun. You could also have a few mechanics that apply to the whole house, like balls being able to break things, boxes being able to be stacked, or even an item that can help the player move faster or jump higher. You can even have items scattered around other rooms that could apply to the same logic for the puzzle room you're in. Imagine this, you're in a music room and there's a key stuck inside a glass box. You know you need to break it, but the only ball you can find is stuck in the horn of a record player. But wait, you remember you saw a record on the kitchen counter. Maybe if you use that, the ball will get unstuck from the record player, and bada bing bada boom, you get the ball and the key and you can move on. After completing a room, you then get access to another puzzle room through some means, and you can progress through the game smoothly. The puzzles could even be connected to how the neighbor works. Maybe the sound of the record player attracts him or something, or the more puzzles you complete, the smarter the neighbor gets. There are so many possibilities. And along with all this, have a way to hint at what you're supposed to do to the player. Make the object glow, give them a little animation, maybe have a quick sound effect sound when they're close, who knows. Now, the reason I'm not going to talk about the neighbor's gameplay just yet is because I want to give him his own segment, because it feels like a whole can of worms that needs to be given our full attention, since that is the main threat and the selling point of the game. Like I mentioned before, I feel like the bad mechanics of the game is more the fault of the art style, and that's why it also deserves its own segment. So why don't we delve into that next and talk about the good, the bad, and the really bad. Okay, the art style. Now, this is one of the few aspects I like about the game. The wacky looking objects and environment layouts are actually really charming in my opinion. It reminds me of Dr. Seuss again, or like an old cartoon promoting a cereal or something. However, with an art style that's intentionally wacky and goofy, you're going to immediately run into some problems. With a weird art style like this, logic is going to be very confusing. Like I mentioned in the previous segment, you really need a kind of logic throughout the game. However, the art style brings another problem into the game, and that problem is, with an art style like this, it is very hard to make this game scary. I've seen the argument where they only slapped on the horror tag to attract the horror for kids audience, and while I think that can be true later on in its development, I think at first they did want to make this game scary. Looking at previous versions of the game, it did have some good horror aspects that made it legit scary. They kept relatively the same art style and layout. They just made some textures more grimy, the colors not as bright, and overall harsher shadows. And just small changes like that could make this game scary again. I also want to hone in on the house layout as well in terms of art style, because I feel like the complex and confusing household can be done successfully, but Hello Neighbor kind of fails at this. A lot of games have confusing labyrinths, parts of the game that are intentionally difficult to traverse, but mechanics-wise, they have a structure and a cohesive way around it. It feels like when Hello Neighbor was making their game, they either put everything in intentionally difficult spots or just kind of randomize everything and call it a day. Which, I don't need to tell you, is not the best way to make a game. Throw in the changes in acts, cutscenes, and the multiple nightmare rooms, and you just have a place that is not only confusing and annoying, but you have a setting that doesn't feel charming or enjoyable anymore. We can't grow attached to the environment because it's just as big of an obstacle, if not more, than the neighbor. And I think that's why the art style doesn't really work. It's good, but it doesn't work. So what's my solution? Well, other than the small changes I mentioned before, I think we need to make the house smaller. I know that might sound like a bad idea since a big selling point of the game is you're traversing a large and confusing house, but hear me out. If you scale down the house, it doesn't affect the potential quality of the rooms or the puzzles. In the game, a lot of rooms are mostly empty with random objects sprinkled in just to fill up space, and most of the time those objects aren't relevant to what you need to do in that room or the game as a whole. So if we make the house smaller, it would be easier to fill those rooms in with more interesting and relevant stuff. And that also adds to the horror aspect. It makes the room more claustrophobic and unsettling, like you're truly roaming a fully furnished home. It would also make the neighbor harder to see in all of this mess. One of the few strengths I'd say Hello Neighbor had was showing how weird this neighbor guy was in terms of his house and all the stuff he had in it, and I think it should stay that way because it made the environment and gameplay more memorable in early versions of the game. When you have an art style that complements the gameplay and works together, it's a harmony that creates a truly memorable experience for the player, one that they will enjoy after the fact and maybe give them some motivation to play again and again. Okay, so we've gone over the story, the gameplay, and the art style, but I've left the elephant in the room. Him. Okay, so the neighbor. He's undoubtedly the mascot of the game. He's on all the promotional material and he's the main threat of the game. But he's easily the most flawed part of the game. And I'll explain why when it comes to the previously mentioned aspects of the game. Story-wise, he's confusing and very cryptic. At some point, he was considered a creepy guy, a mourning father, and I'm pretty sure at one point a Satan worshiper. But after all that, he just became a weird guy that liked kidnapping kids. But we're also supposed to feel for the guy. It's just another confusing mess that is both predictable and not in a weird way. Gameplay-wise, he used to have a really cool AI where he learned from your moves and planned accordingly to prevent you from using the same tactics. And that was really cool. However, as the game progressed and they added a bigger house with more confusing rooms, they kind of reverted him to a free-roaming enemy that didn't know his own house very much. He would get stuck super easily and softlock himself to the point where he never becomes a threat anymore. And when your main villain isn't a villain anymore, you're just in a weird escape room themed like someone's house. And finally, art style wise, his design is effective and unnerving, but the position he's in, he just kinda looks goofy and not all that threatening. His facial expressions are not exaggerated well, his color palette doesn't invoke any stress, he never talks throughout the game, and his overall presence isn't effective in scaring anyone. His design doesn't give creepy neighbor, it gives guy at church you don't talk to for too long. So after berating this man to the stratosphere for all of his flaws, how do we fix him? Well, here's what I'm thinking. For his story, make him human with his background, but still an unforgivable monster. Make the part about his daughter dying and family being broken true, but make his actions still inexcusable. Write him in a way where the player can understand why he's doing such a thing, but still make him a monster that no one will support or root for. He's a villain through and through. For his gameplay, make his AI more like the first version. Make him learn from the player and adapt accordingly. Also, for the love of God, make him able to traverse his own house. Maybe make the neighbor's AI smart enough to always know the fastest way to the player. Nothing is more nerve-wracking than a monster that knows how to get to you in the fastest way possible. And finally, for his art style, we should do something special. On the screen now, I'm making my own tweaked design of the neighbor. What I did was I took his canon design and mixed it with the shadow monster from before. What I'm thinking is that as the game goes on, the neighbor's look changes to slowly resemble the trauma monster we see in later acts. Not only does this show the threat of the neighbor, but also shows how traumatized the player is by seeing the face of his kidnapper again. You could even make the neighbor look this way when you're in the basement or in cutscenes. I think this design would fit both the overall narrative of trauma and the vibe of the game super well. I'm really proud of this design, and if you want to see it in more detail... Okay, so while I've been drawing, the neighbor has actually been staring at me a lot. I don't think he likes my opinions very much, so I'm gonna call someone and hopefully they can get me out of here. I'll take anyone at this point, even Hallex. So these are all the problems, and those are all my solutions. Overall, doing all the research, planning, and sketching for this project, it reminded me that a lot of care needs to be put into a game. I've only made a small handful in my day, and while they were quick and probably not that good, they were still a lot of fun to make, and I cared for them. I think my biggest issue with this game personally is that it feels soulless. Like, there was no love put into it at all, or better yet, there used to be love, but through both ambition, greed, and maybe some laziness along the way, that love fell flat, and the result is a game that did have the potential to be great, is now just something that people forgot about. And if there's anything I want you to take away from this video, I hope it's this. Be passionate about what you love, always look for the good parts of things, even if it feels impossible, and never trust a man with a butt chin and a mustache. And that's the end of the video. Let me know what you think of my ideas in the comments and interact with the video, it really helps a lot. If you want to have a say in what I make next or want to support me, follow my socials here, and yeah. Oh, he's here. Yep, he's over there by the window. Well, I'm not gonna get him, he has a shovel. I'm bad with shovels, remember when we were playing golf with Scoundrel? Make sure to relax today.